There we go. That was so beautiful, Rachel. Thank you so much for sharing your gift with us. Good morning. My name is Kathleen Plinsky, and I am honored to be here this morning with you, with so many engaged community members, as well as participants from throughout the country. Thank you for joining us. I would also like to thank our partner, the Early Learning Coalition of Orange County, and our sponsors, including Orlando Health, for supporting us in making today possible. As Executive Vice President and Provost of Valencia College, I can assure you that community well-being is part of our shared commitment. Making an impact on the quality of life in our community is a top priority. And now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are challenged to think creatively and consider innovative systems change to support resilience and human thriving. At Valencia, we recognize that learning happens best when individuals feel secure in their learning environments. Supporting students to thrive in this new normal has been our primary focus over the last several weeks. We have an exceptional community of professionals at the college, willing to go to great lengths in order to strengthen ourselves and our systems to support students during this unprecedented time. Building resilience in ourselves and within our community is of critical importance to all of us, especially now. Recognizing that many of the graduating high school teens from the region will be joining us in the fall, and that a large percentage of our current students are young adults learning to navigate the complexities of life, we know the importance of today's topic as educators, parents, grandparents, and adults playing significant roles in the lives of young people. We could not have anticipated how relevant today's speaker, Dr. Kenneth Ginsburg, would be given our current circumstances. Dr. Ginsburg is a pediatrician specializing in adolescent medicine at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, a professor of pediatrics at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, and co-founder and director of programs at the Center for Parent and Teen Communication. He also serves Philadelphia's homeless youth as director of health services at Covenant House, Pennsylvania. The theme that ties together his clinical practice, teaching, research, and advocacy efforts is that of building on the strength of teenagers by fostering their internal resilience. His goal is to translate the best of what is known from research and practice into practical approaches that parents, professionals, and communities can use to prepare children and teens to thrive. He is a sought-after expert who has appeared on CNN, NPR, The Today Show, Good Morning America, the CBS Morning Show, Fox and Friends, and ABC, NBC, and CBS nightly news programs. His book, Building Resilience in Children and Teens, Giving Your Child Roots and Wings, is coming out in its 4th edition and includes timeless content about how to help children and adults develop resilience, and offers meaningful protection against the effects of childhood trauma. We are so very fortunate to have Dr. Kenneth Ginsburg here with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. We're just going to get my screen up. I want to tell you that I am so profoundly thrilled to be here this morning. First of all, Rachel, put a thumbs up if you can see my PowerPoint. Yay! You know, I was excited about being here anyway, but the way this morning started was astounding to me. Whether it started with, you know, the film from the hospital that we couldn't hear the words yet, but we could see those kids' cheeks bouncing as they walked. going through those gorgeous principles, which I want to copy, hearing the mindfulness exercise, hearing Rachel Weaver sing, and hearing our Rachel or seeing our Rachel sway to the songs, I feel ready for today, and I feel authentically honored. I'm glad that Rachel prepared you for the fact that we can't control our environments. I am a healthcare worker. I am quarantined in my basement, away from my family, and Pokey is going to be joining me, sitting on my head, and definitely pooping on my head at some point in this 2.5 hours. I can't control this situation. He just landed on my shoulder. Let's begin. Oh, the one other thing is you're going to listen to this little man talk for a very long time without breaks. So I hope that I can make it, but the good news is that I can't see you, which means that you can stretch, dance in place, go to the bathroom anytime you want and come back and join us. So please, if you feel yourself melting away, take a break, exercise, come back to us. I want you to be learning. So to get started, we're talking about the power of resilience-based, strength-focused communication in working with youth. And I want to begin in kind of a spiritual place. You can imagine that I love kids, and I really do see God in the face of children. And I was surfing the internet one day, and I saw this kid. He grabbed me, his smile grabbed me, and you see right between his eyes, those wrinkles? I have identical twin girls, but only one of them has those wrinkles, Tali. And she could come to me when she was 2 years old, and I would be like, no, not the eyebrow, because if I saw those eyebrows, I could do or would do anything for her. This child inspires me. Like, look at that face. Do you see hope? Do you see joy? Do you see possibility? Do you see a reminder of why we do what we do? Because if we can build a world in which this kid will thrive, we'll build a world in which all children will thrive. I just think this child is one of the most beautiful children I've ever seen. And this young man is on a refugee boat. This young man was just picked up by the Italian Navy in a boat that was sinking. And I don't know what happened in his country that made his parents decide to get on a boat to try to find a better world, but I know that had something to do with him and something to do with protecting him. That I know. But I do know what happened in the last hour. I know in the last hour the boat was sinking. In the last hour there was terror. People were cold, people were wet, and people were worrying that they would die. And yet you look at this child, and this child looks okay. This child reminds you of why we do what we do. So what is this picture really about? This picture really is this best picture I've ever seen about resilience. Not only does it tell you that the kids are going to be okay, it tells you why the kids are going to be okay. And what it does is it very clearly defines, look around this picture. Why is this kid okay? It's not internally driven, although kids are inherently resilient. It comes from the adults in their life. When the adults in their life believe in the children, when the adults in their life co-regulate and communicate that the world will be okay, the children will thrive. And that's what we all need to do. Breathe. This is not a mindfulness exercise. This is in preparation for the fact that I'm going to slam you over the next 2.5 hours. I'm not like a everything's happy kind of teacher. I'm about reality, about confronting reality, and about making a better world for all of our kids. So I'm going to read this with you. Once upon a time, there was a town built beyond the bend of a beautiful river. Children were playing beside the river when they noticed 3 bodies in the water. They ran for help, and the townsfolk quickly pulled the bodies out of the river. One was dead, so they buried her. One was ill, so they took him to the hospital and nursed him to health. The third was healthy, so they placed her with a family who cared for her and took her to school. Every day, bodies came floating down the river, and every day, people tended to them, taking the sick to the hospitals, placing the healthy with families, and burying the dead. This went on for years. In fact, the townsfolk came to expect the bodies, and they developed elaborate systems for recovering and attending to them. Some were generous, and a few gave up their jobs to do it full time. The town developed pride in its generosity and efficiency in body tending. However, during all these years and despite the effort, nobody thought to go upriver beyond the bend that hid what was above them and find out, or maybe even ask, why the bodies were floating down the river. Folks, we stand at an inflection point in human history. We have always known that bad things ran in communities. We've always known that if something bad happened to a grandmother, it was more likely to happen to the grandchild. We've always known that. And then as human beings, the darkest side of humanity came out, which is we dealt with those realities by blaming people. We dealt with those realities by othering people, by blaming communities and blaming families, instead of speaking the truth. The truth that now the science in 2020 makes abundantly clear if we open our eyes. And the truth is that there's nothing wrong with the communities and nothing wrong with the families. What is wrong is the fact that the society has inequitable redistribution of resources, and we have families that are struggling. And when families are struggling, they cannot put into place the protective measures that children need to thrive. And as soon as we begin to realize that is when we can begin to heal in society. So, as we thought about this conference, we're talking about trauma, but we're living through a trauma. We're living through a shared trauma like this country has not known in probably a century. And the question is, does that make what we're talking about when we're talking about child trauma and resilience less relevant or more relevant? And I want to make a clarion call for the fact that it makes it more relevant than ever. So number one, we've got an acute trauma going on. We've got something going on that is a shared societal experience, right? And we have to think about how to manage this as a society and move on. But it's more than that, because this also creates an incredible opportunity for healing. Here's what we know. This unsettling time is going to leave a generational mark on young people. This is the moment. Just like your grandparents, depending on your age, your grandparents, if they were depression kids, they had this frugality about them, right? The World War II kids felt like they could handle anything. The Vietnam kids understood injustice, right? There's a generational mark. Well, this is going to be the generational mark of our generation. They're all going to be talking in 50 and 60 and 70 years to their grandchildren about who they were and what they learned during the pandemic of 2020. That's what's going to happen. And what they learn and what they carry forth is not yet determined. And I believe that we can shape it. Because there is absolutely something that all of us have in common. And the marketers get it. If you're looking at whether it's the commercials on TV, whatever they're trying to sell you, it's all out there right now. It's all about togetherness. That's the message of today, right? But social distancing, physical distancing creates a reality. And the reality is that it makes you hungry for connection, right? Imagine the things we've taken for granted. I have not touched my wife in 5 weeks. I have not hugged my kids in 5 weeks. I have not been to a house of worship. Our kids cannot go to school. Imagine what's going to happen where our kids can return to school and understand how valuable it is to learn next to another child. Above all, imagine what it's going to be like for this generation of kids when they can hug their grandparents again. Things that we took for granted, things that seem passive, are suddenly going to be understood as the juice of life. And if we can make it so that this generation understands the power and the primacy of relationships, then this generation will lead us into a better future than anything that we've ever imagined. And that's what we have to think about. Let's not just leave it to the marketers who know that this is selling now. Let's really begin thinking about how to shape the impact that it's going to leave. I want to read for you something I wrote, which is a complete ruination of an Aesop's fable. But an Aesop's fable this fable is not something I'd read to the Peace and Justice Institute, because this is all about a soldier. So let's modify it, Ginsburgize it, and make it about now. A young person was frustrated, angry, and feeling powerless. That young person even felt as if they were at their breaking point. Sometimes this showed through the words that were spoken or screamed, sometimes through flowing tears and most often through silence. A loving caregiver approached the young person and said, "I know these moments are frightening, and sometimes it feels as if we have no control over our lives. Sometimes it even feels as though we will break, like a stick about to snap. The lesson is driven home when the youth is given a stick and challenged to break it. The young person easily breaks the stick in two, relating deeply to its fragility. The caring adult then gathers several sticks, ties them together, and hands them to the child. Go ahead, try to break the sticks now." The young person tries and can barely even get them to bend. The compassionate adult guide helps the youth to own the wisdom. Each of these sticks by themselves can easily break, but when they're joined with others, they become stronger than if we added all of their individual strengths together. We are like a bundle of sticks. Each of us can be fragile at any moment, but together we are strong. We will get through this because we are together. Now listen to what this adult did. This adult did not deny the emotions. This adult did not deny the feeling of fragility. This adult did not say, "Oh, you're going to get through it. Oh, ignore it. These feelings aren't real." They didn't do that. They acknowledged the fragility. They acknowledged the reality. They celebrated and perhaps even elevated the emotions. And they said, "You know, it's all true. I don't have an answer. But the part I do understand is that together we can get through this." And that is the lesson of this for this generation. There's another thing about coronavirus. You know, in the beginning, people were saying, you know, the popular thing to say was, this germ knows no boundaries, it knows no cultures, it knows no politics. Well, you know what? It's just not true, right? This experience underscores that it is short-sighted and wrong to treat this as a germ that does not discriminate. It does. And the reason it discriminates is not about genetics. It is about epigenetics. And that will be understood within the hour. At the root of why it discriminates is at the crux of the reason that now, right now, is not the time to set aside the topic of trauma and resilience. It is because of trauma that we have. It is a privilege to be able to physically separate. It is a privilege to be able to stock your refrigerator and not have to go out on a daily basis because you have just enough money to get that food if you do. It is a privilege to be able to for me to be able to live in my finished basement as opposed to a crowded house. These are a privilege. It is a privilege that in the root of my genetics, I do not, because of generations of trauma, have high blood pressure, diabetes, and other physical ailments that are absolutely linked to poverty, racism, and discrimination. It is a privilege. And until we understand that, and if we do not grab this moment to have people understand this, then we will waste this opportunity. If we do not grab this moment to have people understand that at least 22 million people got out of hell, lost their jobs or filed for unemployment in the last month. And guess what? They didn't just file for unemployment. Do you know that some of them lost their insurance during a pandemic? This is a privilege. Let us not say that now is not the time to talk about resilience and trauma. Let us now say this is the time to double down on why these situations exist. Childhood trauma affects the body, the brain, behavior, and even genetics. But I will tell you something. I have the deepest respect for Felidi, who was there with you last year. He created this movement with Rob Anda. They are my heroes. But I have also seen that this movement nationally has backfired. And I want to put out that it's backfired. And I know that you are sensitive to this because never, ever in any presentation I've given around the country, which is literally hundreds of them, have I seen it start as Mr. Jefferson did when he said, please know that if you experience vicarious trauma during this talk, we know we got you. We know this will bring things up for you. We know this will trigger things for you because it does. So what happened is that I have followed many trauma-informed folks. I'm a trauma-sensitive folk. It's very different because I don't care what you know, I care what you do, right? And I have followed many trauma-informed folks who have left communities in shambles because they walk away with this message that basically says the worst thing that ever happened to me became me, defines me, and I'm going to pass it to my children. That is not an acceptable message, right? So what we need is a model that includes everything we've learned from positive youth development, from resilience building strategies, and from trauma-sensitive practices. A model that acknowledges pain but sees the best in people. A model that recognizes structural racism and the undermining forces of low expectations, but that prevents a new label from being slapped on already marginalized communities. We don't need our communities of color to have an extra label of being traumatized. We need their resilience, their survival skills to be elevated and celebrated, right? So in sharp contrast, we have to recognize the inherent strengths of individuals, communities, and cultures. This is a model that what I'm going to be describing, these are my works. I'm not telling you this. I'm not a salesman here. I produce works to change the world. And on the left, what you see is Reaching Teens. Reaching Teens is an unbelievably comprehensive toolkit that has special portals of entry for healthcare providers, educators, juvenile justice, substance use, homeless programs, foster care parents, foster care professionals, coaches, and I left something out, I'm sure, because it has 9 portals. It is a community toolkit that is used by individual programs. Do not buy it as an individual, it's expensive, right? But do buy it as a community and as organizations. And I'm going to give you the summary of it here. This 4th edition of Building Resilience on the right, this is a book, this is affordable, it's incredibly cheap. Don't buy the one you can buy right now because the 4th edition is coming out in 3 weeks. All right, so make sure you get the right one. But everything I'm saying is in these topics areas. So when we talk about these 3 models, at the root of all the models is the primacy and power of human relationships, both to build strong, successful youth and to heal those who've endured hardships. What we do is we seek the sweet spot, the spot where we can really help build youth. And in this paragraph, which is the Reaching Teens model, you should see without jargon, positive youth development, a call to restorative practices, resilience building strategies, and trauma sensitive strategies. And this is what this talk is about. We need young people, we know young people need safe, secure, sustained relationships to thrive. We even know that such relationships can allow them to heal from hard past. But we have to guide them so that they're accountable to being their best selves. When we do so, they must know that our high expectations are rooted in our caring. And ideally, our efforts at accountability must enhance rather than disrupt our protective relationships. Let me tell you why this is so important. Just some of the hats I wear is I'm kind of international coach for Covenant House. I'm deeply involved as a resilience expert for Boys and Girls Clubs of America. I travel the country. I go site to site from other organizations as well. I'll tell you what happens. When you institute trauma-informed practices, organizations fracture. And the reason they fracture is that when you understand what trauma does to people, you might become super compassionate and empathetic, as you should. But if you become so empathetic with people that you lower your standards and you say, because something has happened to you, I will not expect the best from you, then you become one more chain in the link of oppression and you harm people. Which is why the positive youth development folks at these organizations will then go into conflict with the trauma-sensitive folks, trauma-informed folks, which is why we have to integrate models. And what you see in this paragraph is, yes, we're holding kids accountable to be their very best selves. And by the time I'm done, you will get why and how to do that. Because, I work with some of the toughest kids on earth, and I'm the luckiest guy in the world, because let me tell you something about them. They're also the most compassionate beings on the planet. I'm the lucky one, right? But people don't know that, and that's what we need to know. And we have to hold kids accountable to being their highest selves. So in theory, where can the greatest progress be made? This puzzle metaphor is something you'll see from me a lot, by the way, just to give you a heads up on it. And it's basically, the puzzle is, who am I? It's the puzzle of adolescence. And it's going to come up 2 or 3 more times today. But what happens is that it is when kids get to the edges of the puzzle that they are going to confront feedback or resistance from us. And when can we really create the greatest change? To do this, you have to understand brain development. Brain development begins when you are an infant. You get born and you make a noise. You gurgle. And your mom either recognizes that as hunger and takes out a breast, in which case, and when that happens repeatedly, your brain pathways will begin to get developed to understand, when I make an utterance, this wonderful thing, I don't know who she is, but she smells good and she seems to like me, meets my needs. And then you learn that the world is predictable. But if your mother is unable to recognize that signal because of burdens in her life, then what do? Then you cry. And if crying is good enough for her to take out her breast, your brain learns that all I need to do is make a little bit of extra noise to get what I need. But suppose she still doesn't give you what she needs, what you need. And then what do? Next? You scream, right? And if that happens repeatedly, then your brain pathways say that in order to be heard, I need to scream, I need to be reactive. But suppose you still are not fed, then it doesn't matter how long you scream. Then you begin self-stimulating. Then you begin doing what it takes to quell your hunger because you're not going to be fed, and you learn that what you do doesn't matter. And if this happens repeatedly, then your brain pathways say what I do doesn't matter, I don't have agency. And now these kids come to us, those kids deserving of most focused attention. Right? They come to us, the kids in our shelters, the kids in foster care, the kids in juvenile justice, the kids who haven't been blessed with homes that are resourced. These kids come to us and their brains are wired to be hyper-vigilant for danger and reactive. So as a mechanism to defend themselves. And they have had the life experience that says adults who look like me react with ignoring them, downgrading or degrading their emotions, that we react by telling them what they feel doesn't matter, and then we ignore their entreaties for attention, or we shut them down with punitive measures. That is what they expect. Their brains are wired to not be listened to. Their brains are wired to need to be reactive in order to get what they need. But adolescence is a time of profound and rapid brain development. Brains are still plastic. You can't change this almost 60-year-old. You can't change me. But you can take the adolescent and you can completely change their brain. What happens? It's when a pattern begins and they have expectations of what's going to happen, but it doesn't. It's when they are reactive and they expect you to be punitive, but you're not. Instead of rejecting them, they are embraced. They express their emotions, and instead of being unheard and quieted, they are listened to, and their emotions are respected and elevated, and we guide them how to express their emotions. It's when what they expect to happen doesn't happen. It's when we do the opposite, which is why now is the moment. I've been talking all over the country at this point to try to make people understand that this moment matters for healing for everybody. But for the kids who expect the worst of adults, we can literally transform their brains, which will have impact far into the future. And all we have to do is be the adults that they deserve in their lives, the adults that they have always deserved in their lives. And when we do that, we will see profound change. The coronavirus, again, we who serve people who serve young people should be the kind of adults they deserve in their lives. We must create environments where youth can be heard, process their emotions, and ultimately made to feel safe. We can't talk away uncertainty, but we can join together. We can create safe settings, safe settings, which is a haven that says the world is complicated, but in this space we care about each other, in this space we protect each other, and in this space I got you. Today, we're talking about positive youth development, trauma-sensitive care. We're going to be talking about resilience in the developing adolescent brain. We're going to integrate those models a little bit into some applied practices. And more than anything, the applied practice could all be summarized in this way. It is giving control back to people from whom control has been taken away. And if you do that, that is deeply good for all adolescents. When you're trauma sensitive, you're not hurting anybody, you're helping everybody. Because all of adolescence is supposed to be about gaining more control. It just so happens to be that for the kids who never had it, it's even that much more relevant. We're also going to talk about stress management strategies. I'm going to give you a link. You already actually have it in your slides. You just don't know it yet. A link to an interactive stress management plan that your kids can write their own plans. All right. And we're going to talk, I'm not sure if we're going to talk about parenting because I don't know if I can get that in during this time. But I got so much on parenting, you wouldn't believe it's all free to you. Let's talk about youth development. How do we define success for all young people? First thing we got to do, stop looking at the children. Stop looking at the 5-year-olds, as cute as their cheeks are. Stop looking at them and look at success in the moment. Because if you're going to look at success in that moment, you're going to overstress happiness or how they're doing in school. No. Instead, imagine the 35-year-old that you're building. Imagine that 35-year-old and think, what does she need to be successful? She needs to be happy, right? But being happy is about having a sense of meaning and purpose, right? She needs to be hardworking, to have tenacity, to have grit, to have stick-to-itiveness. She needs to be compassionate. We want her to be the kind of person who, when she walks down the streets, she does not avert her eyes to human tragedy. She does not blame the victim. She understands that something happened to that person. It's all of our job to lift them up. We need her to be creative and innovative. We need her to be able to honor diversity in the truest sense of the word, which means doing it differently than my generation. You know what my generation does? My generation gets people in a room. They count genders, maybe orientations, they count races, they count ages, and if there's different people in the room, we pat ourselves in the back and say we've created a diverse environment. That was never diversity, that was tokenism. They're two very different things. True diversity is when you honor the wisdom of the people in the room and you choose to share power and act on their wisdom. It is a different and emphatic kind of listening that is different than the way my generation did it. And if we can raise the 35-year-olds who know how to do that, we're going to change the world. Karen Pittman, the mother of youth development, said, problem-free is not fully prepared. You know, I'm a doctor, right? This was the sentence, by the way, that changed my life. As a doctor, when I was starting an adolescent doctor, the big thing was like STDs. You know, and we talk to kids, we'd have 5 or 6 sentences with them, and then we'd say things like, don't get chlamydia. Well, you know what? Not getting chlamydia is not inspirational, right? There's no inspiration in that message, right? We want kids to understand that we want them to be fully prepared to lead us into the future. Remember what the fundamental questions of adolescence are. The big one is, who am I? And then the corollary questions are, am I normal and how do I fit in? Which means that for those kids who don't fit into the mainstream, think, for example, LGBT kids, the questions, am I normal and how do I fit in, take on huge meaning. You understand why bullying matters so much. Who am I? I'm someone who's worthy of being denigrated. It's devastating. We matter, right? So at Boys and Girls Clubs, for example, you know, we've got great basketball courts. Some of our sites have pools, right? But let me tell you, a pool has never changed a kid's life. Not once, not once. What changes the life is the coach or the swim coach or the lifeguard who says, I got you. You're not going to sink on my watch, right? So we matter. Kids come for content, but it's the context, the loving nature, the loving kindness nature, the respectful nature of adults that makes a difference. Let's talk about brain development now. I teach you brain development not to teach you science, but to teach you basic communication. Because until you understand brain development, then you don't really know how it is we mess up with kids. This is the strategy that's going to teach you how to bring out the best in kids. All right? Because if you know how to talk to a kid and you know how to actually do it, kids are, once they're about in mid-puberty, so think 14, right? 14, 15, they're every bit as wise, and I would say a lot wiser in many ways, than adults are. Right? But you got to know what you're doing. So here's some vocabulary, assuming you're not all neuroscientists. Gray matter, also known as neurons. Those are the nerve cells, and more or less, you have the same amount of nerve cells when you're 2 as you do when you're 22. What is different is white matter. White matter is the connections between the nerve cells, and this white matter is insulated with myelin for speed and efficiency. Myelin is this fatty, waxy substance that basically insulates it. What does insulation do? Insulation means, do I have a wire around here? I don't. If I stage, I usually have a wire. Yes, I do. There we go, my phone. Why is this insulated? It is insulated so I don't get electrocuted, which is cool, right? But the fact that I'm not getting electrocuted means that the signals are going faster without going into the air and getting wasted. So when something is insulated, everything is much, much faster. Indeed, development is about the development of these insulation of white matter. Neural pathways are the connections between different parts of the brain. What is development? When you get born, you got all this gray matter, all these nerve cells, and they're connected, and your brain works, but they're connected with what I call gravelly roads. The signals get to different places, but through really bumpy and slow channels. Then what happens is that you begin developing these neural pathways. And the neural pathways you can think of as super highways, right? That they will actually make everything travel much, much quicker, right? Where did the super highways get built? Between the towns. In other words, the parts of the brain that you use the most, where you have the most experiences, there's going to be a super highway that is going to grow between them. Right? So for better or worse, those towns are built. Dopamine is a feel-good brain chemical that offers you rewards. Reward centers are part of the brains filled with dopamine that encourage a behavior. So for example, in adolescence, you get reward centers around sexuality, right? Which is why you want to be with your peers more, and you're thinking about sex all the time. And while that can be maddening for the adults who worry about kids, remember that it's that reward center that's ultimately going to get you grandchildren, right? It is a biologic need, all right? Superhighways get built between the towns, and reward centers encourage the towns to get built in certain places. Experiences, for better or worse, the mother taking out a breast as soon as she sees her baby gurgle, versus the mother refusing or unable, refusing was the wrong word, unable to notice the need. Depending on what happens, that's where the town gets laid down. Prefrontal cortex, part of the brain that's most involved with thinking, reasoning, planning, decision-making, evaluating, and modulating or modifying emotions. The amygdala, straight back from the nose, which is a part of the brain that's critical to emotional responses. Pruning. You know what? Once you have the superhighways down, you don't need the gravelly roads anymore, so you cover them up. The brain is developing and shifting in order to increase efficiency. And neuroplasticity, I talked about that in the beginning. The brain can change and reshape itself for better or worse to adapt to its environment, and this is the key to development. Adolescence is a time of astoundingly rapid brain growth where brains remain plastic. Okay, what do we know about adolescence? The emotional centers, which is that green thing right there, it's actually the green and the orange part, they develop first. Kids are brilliant emotionally. They are picking up on body language signals. It's why, for those of you who have adolescents, you can look at your kid and your eyebrows can just go like this, and they're like, why do you hate me? It's because they are sensing and feeling everything. The reward centers are very powerful, and they determine where brain pathways will develop. Pruning is occurring, efficiency is developing. Remember, development is a process, not an event. But here's the key. Reasoning ability always exists. What the people who I hate when they describe brain science, they always talk about like all engine, no brakes, kids are emotional, they're irrational. Not true. It's just not true. Reasoning ability always exists, but it needs some extra support. Here's the wrong way to see it. This was an Allstate ad that I can't stand. Why do most 16-year-olds drive like they're missing a part of their brain? Because they are. The last thing, if kids live up or down to your expectations, the last thing I need is kids thinking that they're missing a part of their brain, right? What's the truth? Brains are developing, and this is an critically important opportunity to shape the future. But brains don't exist in bottles. They exist in people who exist within families, who exist within communities. This is the time to enrich and protect kids. Adolescents are super learners. They are picking up information like they never will at any time in their life, except for the time they're born to 3 years old. They're developing their social selves. Experimentation is a necessity. It is our job to create enriching, exciting, safe opportunities for growth. It's also our job to protect from harm. So here's this puzzle again. Why do super learners push the edges? And what's our role? Learning happens at the edge of existing knowledge. They have to push. That's what their brains are wiring them to do. They are thrilled when they sense a new experience, so they're going to push to the edges. When adults set very clear boundaries and say, you may not go beyond this boundary, then kids will stay within safe opportunities. And when we create those golden opportunities at the edges of the puzzle, then kids will stop there and feel enriched. Their biologic need to be rewarded will happen with the school play, with learning in school, with talking to family and friends. They will be enriched. However, when we do not create safe boundaries, when we do not create golden opportunities at the edges, then they do not have a biological mechanism to stop, and that's where risk exists. In other words, adolescent risk is a failure of adults. That is the issue. It is a failure of adults to create the golden opportunities for our kids. Communication for the developing brain. It's about hot versus cold. We know that their amygdala, their emotional centers, are a little more developed. We know that their thinking centers lag a little bit behind, but they're there. So the question is, how do you talk to a kid? How you talk to a kid is going to depend on which part of their brain is turned on. So when we talk the way most adults talk to kids, when we lecture them, when we are condescending, demeaning, degrading, then you are speaking to their amygdala. And when you speak to their amygdala, their emotional center is on fire, and they can't think because they're running from the tiger. The secret is to be radically calm, deeply respectful, to talk to in ways that kids understand so that they feel intelligent instead of stupid. When we do that, the rational part of their brain dominates, and you are talking to an adult, and they can plan and they can be reasoned with. But when you lecture a kid, when you get angry at a kid, you are talking to their amygdala and you've lost them. It's all about knowing what you are doing. All right? Resilience. Just a different model. Remember, it's the ability to overcome adversity. It's the capacity to bounce back. It's a mindset. It's about how you think. You got to understand the biology. This little guy's great-great-great-great-grandpa was the most terrifying things in our human genome's existence, right? We are designed to be able to run from a tiger. If you don't believe me, think about it. Here I am in my jungle chair, right? And I'm just chewing on some berries. I see a tiger come to me. What is the first physical sensation that I'm going to have? The first thing I'm going to have is butterflies in my belly. Why? Because if I smell a tiger, the first thing I need to do is jump, and then I need to run. Well, why do I get butterflies in my belly? Because where do I need the blood if I'm going to jump and run? It's all about the butt. So butterflies is literally the blood going from my belly, rushing to my butt so I can jump and escape. Isn't that cool? All right. All right, then your heart beats fast so you can pump that blood. You sweat so you can cool off while you're running. You breathe fast so you can oxygenate that blood while you're running. Your pupils are big so you can jump over the log, even if it's dark out, and still survive. You can't think when a tiger is chasing you. Why is that? Because you're not supposed to turn to the tiger and say, hey, can we work this out? I'd just like to talk about it. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to be running. And you know what else you can't do? You can't feel. You can't feel because you're not supposed to turn to the tiger and say, help me understand why it is you want to eat me. I just want to understand your viewpoint. So when a tiger is chasing your butt, you cannot plan, you cannot think, you cannot feel. So at the core, resilience is a mindset where you understand when there's really a tiger chasing you and when it only feels like there's one that's chasing you. And if you also understand the biologic mechanisms that I just taught you, you understand why mindfulness works, which we'll get to later, okay? But you really understand why it is that you're turning on the no tiger here part of your nervous system. The bottom line of resilience is that young people are going to be more resilient when the important adults in their lives believe in them without condition. Without condition doesn't mean you go, hey, Johnny, you can do drugs. Without condition means, hey, Johnny, whatever you're living through, it's my job to correct you, but you're not going to lose me. You got me, right? And hold them to high expectations. High expectations is not trophies, it's not grades, it's not scores, it's knowing who kids are. The most protective thing in young people's lives is when adults see them as they deserve to be seen and know who they really are. This is my favorite picture of childhood. This is Tali. This is my daughter with the eyebrows. And she's 2.5. It's Valentine's Day. I got her a chocolate rose. I got her twin sister a chocolate rose and my wife a chocolate rose. Tali ate hers and she thought it was delicious. It was so good that she was pretty sure that my wife's chocolate rose would be just as yummyful. But she was also pretty sure that if she could eat it but nobody could see her eating it, it would be okay. So this is my favorite picture of catching this little girl in the act. This is called object permanence, right? So what do you do when your kid's messing up? Do you go and do you like chastise her and do you punish her? Or do you understand all that is good and right and draw from that to make her understand? This is a girl who was already walking bugs outside so they could be with their bug grandmas. Right? This girl is she's now a social work student at Penn and a law student so that she can work on mass incarceration, right? That's who she is. And that's who she always was. So if I come down on her in a punitive mood, she doesn't learn a lesson. She's just running from the tiger. But if I talk about how much she cares about fairness and how in this circumstances she could draw from her internal wisdom, then I got a kid who I can work with. This is the 7 C's model of resilience I'm going to show you. This is my model. It is borrowed from the people down at the bottom who are like the mothers and fathers of positive youth development. So the first thing you need is confidence. Where do you get confidence from? It's not from showering vapid praise on people. It's not from telling people they're special as a butterfly, unique as a snowflake. It's not from looking at Tommy coming down the sliding board and going, look at you, Tommy. You are so brave. You are so brilliant. You are so smart. Look at how brave you are. You're doing it. You're doing it. You're doing it. Without ever giving credit to gravity, right? It's not about that. It's not about vapid praise. It is real confidence is built by building people's skills, by noticing all that is good and right, by building what could be better so that they know they can navigate the world. Human connection. I don't think I need to say a thing about it because I think I've talked about it for half an hour already. Character. Think of characters. What would you do if nobody was watching? Right? Contribution. This is the Tikkun Olam piece. Being committed to repairing the world. Why does this matter so much? Because the ultimate act of resilience, first of all, gives you meaning and purpose. And this is what we should really be underscoring now for our kids. But it's really the ultimate act of resilience that prepares you for it. Because if times get really terrible, right, then who survives? It's the people who know how to reach. It's the people who can say, brother, I need a hand. But who's going to be able to reach? It's the people who don't think reaching is a sign of shame. And I'm not going to reach to you out there. if I think you're going to pity me, right? Especially men, right? Which is just a terrible thing about toxic masculinity, but it's just a fact, right? So what do I need to know? I need to know that it feels good to serve. Because when I know that it feels good to serve, I know that I can reach without shame or stigma, all right? Next, coping. We're going to talk about this a lot later. Bottom line is you either reach for the quick, easy fixes because they feel good, or you don't. Everything we fear in adolescence, whether it's sex out of context of relationships, drugs, fighting, violence, all of this is about coping with a harsh reality. Telling kids what not to do has literally never worked, literally never worked. Telling them what to do is the way to go. Control. People either feel like they control their universe or they don't. Resilience is not invulnerability, guys. It is not invulnerability. Our goal is not to have kids not feel. Our goal is to have kids celebrate the fact that they can feel and get them to leverage those emotions so that they can make the world better and become comfortable with themselves as well. When resilience reaches its limits, this in some ways is the most important slide. I assume you have school representatives on here. Is that a fair thing, Rachel? So if you've got schools on here, I need you to know that that red bullet right there, that's the school to prison pipeline. And if you understand this slide, everything will change for kids. See, the problem is one way of saying resilience reaches its limits is to say depression, right? But what happens is adults look at kids and we expect them to be depressed in the way we are depressed. In other words, to like smell because you're not taking care of yourself, to gain weight, to lose weight, to sleep too much, to not sleep enough. Indeed, if nothing else, to be sad. We expect them to be sad, right? But that's true for only half the kids. For the other half of kids, if you ask them if they're sad, they're like, no, right? But if you ask them if they're stressed or angry, it's, yeah, I am. So depression in adolescence presents with rage and irritability 50% of the time. And then what happens is we call these kids bad instead of sad, and then we separate them into the bad kid programs instead of heal them the way they deserve to be healed. And this is the school to prison pipeline. Critical for you to understand. Now we're going to get to trauma-sensitive practices. We've already been talking about them, but we're going to kind of whip through them. Number one, trauma does not break us. What you've got to do when you present this data, when you go out into the community, and you prepared for vicarious trauma, but this is the way it has to be presented to minimize the vicarious trauma. You got to say this stuff first. Trauma does not break us. And while it is true that there are all sorts of numbers, like you're more likely to get diabetes and heart disease, blah, 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 that's all true. But that doesn't mean it will happen. People don't understand medical statistics. Even if something is hugely predictive, like it makes it 4 times more likely, but then it still doesn't mean it's going to happen. But if I go to an audience and I just say you're more likely to get cancer, what people hear is, I'm going to get cancer. Not true. If you had a 3% chance of getting a cancer, even if I've quadrupled it, you still have 12% chance, which means that you are deserving of more focused attention and more prevention. Don't smoke. Exercise. Like there are things you can do to prevent it. Next, results do not go in both directions. So if you're more likely to be obese, which you are, it doesn't mean that you can look at an obese person and say they were traumatized. It's not like that, right? And most importantly, as I'm going to build the case for, people who have had the hardest lives have a different kind of credential and bring so much to the world. And I'm going to tell you why from a brain point of view. This is the study. I know this guy spoke to you last year. This is the original study. It's astoundingly good. What it tells you, so what they did is, for those of you who don't know, they work with 18,000 people in San Diego County. They ask them all the medical questions. These people are 18 to 85. They ask them the medical questions. Then they go a step further and they ask them about their behaviors. Like, have you been in jail? Have you been divorced? Have you used drugs? Are you sad? Are you depressed? Have you attempted suicide? They do all of that stuff, right? And then they go a step further. They say, what happened to you in your home? In your home. Were you emotionally abused, physically abused, sexually abused, neglected? Were you exposed to substance use in your household, mental illness, domestic violence, incarceration, or did you experience divorce or parental abandonment? And then for each one that you say yes to, you get a score of 1. And then because of statistical limitations, they maxed it out at 4. So you either got a score of 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So what's wrong with this data? First of all, it's the best data that was ever produced, so I'm not criticizing it. All right. What's wrong with it is I've never met a 4. Right? You need to know that the kids who I work with at Covenant House on this scale are 9s and 10s to begin with, which means that any data we have doesn't even begin to describe them. Furthermore, it doesn't tell you about the things that happen outside of your home. Where was bullying? Where was racism? Right? Where was poverty, exposure to violence? It wasn't there until Roy Wade, who's, by the way, a mentee of mine, he's also at Children's Hospital, until he did this study that expanded the ACEs. And here's what we know. Childhood trauma affects behavior. I don't think that surprises anybody. The higher your score is, the more likely you are to go to jail, to do drugs, to become depressed, to abandon your family. It doesn't surprise anybody. But also, you're more likely to become obese. You're more likely to get diabetes, heart disease, strokes, high blood pressure, lupus, and other autoimmune diseases, cancer. The more likely you are to actually, depending on if you were abused as a kid, the more likely you are to die as an 80-year-old of a broken bone. It is astounding in a way that changes everything. And it changes your genetics. But that's not why we're here. This is the pivotal slide of trauma-sensitive care. Unless you have a loving adult who stands by your side. And if you have a loving adult who's standing by your side, you can make it through anything. Let's go back to some biology, and I'm going to tell you what's going on. So here I am in my jungle chair, right? So what hormone says to me, tiger, chasing your ass, now? The hormone is adrenaline. Adrenaline says, jump, run, and escape. But suppose the tiger is not, it's not a real tiger. Instead, it is my daddy in my bedroom, it's pervasive poverty. Then I need to be ready to jump and run at any moment. To do that, I need my blood pressure to be high. For my blood pressure to be high, I have a different hormone, which is called cortisol. Cortisol is the poison here. Cortisol is what drives the brain patterns and what drives or helps drive the brain patterns. And cortisol is what makes my glands inside change so that I will drink more water, eat more fatty food, and eat more salt in order to have my blood pressure high. Let's back up for a minute. So there are people in the world, and if there's criticism that I receive when I travel around the country, very, very painful criticism. It is when people say to me, Ken, you always talk about racism and marginalization. Why are you dredging up the past? I don't even know what to say about that, okay? But I want to now show you why when people think about racism, too many people think that its effect is based on those things that are life-threatening in the moment, right? Holocaust, slavery, things like that. But if in this model, I want you to understand what's going on. It's really about unconscious biases and navigating the world in a way that you never know when you stand. If you never know where the tiger is going to be, like if there's a true racist coming at me, a racist that is putting my life in danger, that's adrenaline. Adrenaline is not the poison. The poison is never knowing where I stand, never knowing where I need to jump, never knowing how I can interact in my environment, and never trusting the environment fully. And the poison for that, there could be a tiger there, it could be anywhere. That's cortisol. And if you understand that it's about implicit biases and structural forces that you are forced to navigate, then anybody who says that racism's effect is in the past does not understand the science at all. Okay? So, with that said, now that my cortisol is in my body and I have high blood pressure, you know why I'm eating more. Now you understand obesity. Now you have high blood pressure and obesity. Now you understand diabetes and strokes and heart disease. Now, if I have a red rash and I go to the CVS, right? Do you have CVS's in Florida? Yeah, I see. So I go to CVS, right? I go to the pharmacist and I say, hey, what can you give me for that? They're going to give me hydrocortisone because it is an immune suppressant. Well, if I've been bathed in hydrocortisone in my entire life, then what happens, in my childhood and my formative years, then my immune system will either get downregulated, which makes me more likely to get cancer, or dysregulated, which makes me more likely to get lupus. We get it. We get it all. But now, we know that if you grew up with a grandma that was protective to you, a grandma who said to you, Ken, if your daddy comes home drunk tonight, you're sleeping with me, you're going to be okay. Ken, you cannot go out in the corner, those boys are trouble. And if they ask you why, tell them you're taking care of your grandma. Then I end up being okay. Why? We know that for a fact. I'm going to put it together biologically. Why? Because I am borrowing my grandma's hypervigilance. Indeed, I am borrowing her cortisol, right? Because of her cortisol, I do not need to mount my own. I do not need to change my own body, my own biology. And therefore, the trauma will not affect me on the deep genetic level that it does. But what else do we know about these grandmas? We know that they die too soon. The Covenant House is filled with kids whose parents weren't able to take care of them, but their grandmas were their heart, but they died but they were old, Dr. Ken. Yeah, how old? 52. Right? I hear this literally all the time. So, Rachel, committee, Peace and Justice Institute, William, when you create this initiative in Orlando, if you, God willing, let me continue to be a part of it, you will not just focus on the children, because I am asking each of you to become the grandmas and the grandpas, which means I am potentially hurting you. I am potentially, by making you more hypervigilant, I am increasing your cortisol. And if I do not, with just as much fidelity and credibility, beg you how to take care of yourselves and put into place systems and processes to take care of yourselves, then I am harming you, and we should shut off this thing right now. All right? Which is why I was so moved when you began by saying, if you feel something, we have these people available for you to talk to you. The proper time to influence the character of a child is 100 years before he's born. In each of us lives our childhood and the values of past generations. This is about epigenetics. When I was in medical school, what did we understand? We understood at that point that you had blue eyes if both your parents had blue eyes. That's what we understood. The psychology was, the big psychological question was, is it nature or is it nurture? We know the answer. It's both. Here's what happens. Human beings are born with a certain genetic potential. And they tell you how tall you're going to be, about, depending on nutrition. They tell you the color of your eyes, about the color of your skin, the texture of your hair. It gives you some basic stuff. But also, my genetic potential also says I can grow a tail, gills, and wings. But I don't, because I am a human. So the only things that get expressed in my life are the human genes. All my other genes get suppressed. Now I navigate the environment. And when I navigate the environment, my genes will need to get expressed depending on my need. And if I am navigating poverty and injustice, if I am navigating a father who beats me, then I will need to turn on those genes that allow me to survive in that situation. And here is what we now understand. We understand that when those genes are expressed as a matter of intergenerational survival, they are passed along to the next generation. And that is why African Americans have higher blood pressure than Africans, because of what 400 years of oppression does to your genes. Is why Jews are the most anxious people you're going to meet. It's not, you can make all the jokes you want to make, but that's not it. It's that we are the grandchildren of the people who got on the boats in time. We are the grandchildren of the people who were intrinsically anxious. And if you stayed in Europe, you didn't survive, right? That's the reality. Understanding this changes everything. What does it do to your brain? That green part of the brain right there, your limbic system, your amygdala, is on fire. Okay, it is brilliant. All right, what does it do to your behavior? It makes you less likely to trust someone, which is really hard for me, right? Because I care about trust so much. And when I'm working with these kids and they don't trust me, gosh, it's hard. It makes you more likely to act out. And I value calm so much, which makes it really hard for me. It makes you more likely to lie. Why is that? Because if you come home and your daddy comes home and he says, hey, Ken, who ate the last hot dog? And you say, I did, and he throws you against the wall, you stop seeing hot dogs. It makes you more likely to confabulate, meaning to make up stories that aren't rooted in reality. Why? Because if bad things were happening to you, you don't remember what happened to you, but you do remember the Super Bowl stain on the wall, and you remember the water stain on the ceiling, embedded in your memory deeply. So what that means is that when I'm getting close to your truth, you may begin to confabulate again, or to dissociate from me, to back away from me, all of which is really hard for me because I care so much about human connection. Do you get why this is hard for me? Do you get it? It's so hard to have people not necessarily trust me, not necessarily tell me the truth, to be reactive. So hard if I thought it was about me. And that's the beginning of trauma-sensitive practices. When we know what is about you versus the fact that you have the privilege to stand alongside someone as their well-earned anger might be justified, everything changes. Trauma does not break kids, nor does it cause brain damage. So one of the things I care about deeply, and Rachel, please ask me to send you this article. I am so sick and tired of kids coming to me and telling me that they have anger problems. Kids telling me that they have oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder. They've been told that they're bipolar. They've been told that they're absolutely everything. My favorite, of course, is intermittent explosive disorder. This litany of diagnoses that say what's wrong with them. These diagnoses change the way people see themselves. They change the way society interacts with them and the way systems interface with them. They run the school to prison pipeline, because if you have a kid with oppositional defiance in your class when they're 5 years old, you begin trying to control them. Your mechanism is, so let's do a little exercise now. I want you to close your eyes and to listen to how you react to these diagnoses. This is Linda. She's oppositional. This is Jamal. He's got conduct disorder. This is Mi Wen, and she has bipolar disease. This is Billy, and he's depressed. This is Scott, and he has ADD. This is LaShonda, and she has intermittent explosive disorder. Open your eyes. How do you react? The kids who are depressed and anxious, you want to embrace. The kids who are oppositional, you want to control. You want to teach them a lesson. You want them to understand that they're the problem. And let me tell you something else. I'm sorry to keep getting back to this, but you just can't face reality if you don't talk about this. We know for a fact, and I published a very comprehensive paper on this, we know for a fact that those diagnoses are given discordantly by race and class. Right? So if you are more likely to tell a kid from an indigenous nation or a Latino kid or a black kid that they're oppositional defiant, then face the fact you're more likely to send them to prison too. Right? So we have to change it. The biggest impact I have on human beings' lives, I swear to God, the biggest impact, and if you walk away with this, and Rachel, please ask me to send you, it's in Reaching Teens too, but I'll send you the chapter in advance. If we can help these kids understand they have protectors' brains, everything changes. Doc, I have an anger problem. I'll bet you've earned it. Let me ask you a question. Are you someone who sees danger before other people do? Oh, yeah. And then kids will tell you they have intuition. They can look at someone's face and know when they're going to go off, right? Yeah. Do you have a little brother or sister? Both. You watch out for them? Always. You got good friends? Nah. With people you'd call friends, I'd call family. But I got a lot of associates. Yeah, well, your good friends or your family, do you do what it takes to watch out for them? Always. What happens to me isn't going to happen to them. So if you see danger coming at you or coming at your friends, do you do what it takes to protect them? Absolutely. Well, you know what, man? You have a protector's brain, and you've earned it. And if I was on a desert island, I'd want you standing alongside me, because you're going to care about me and you're going to take care of me, right? It's your superpower, man. But you know what? Your job is to figure out when to keep your cape tucked in. Because if you don't know when there's real danger and you take out your superpower, it's going to mess you up. And I don't want that to happen to you. And I'm just wondering if we can work together in a way that will help you know when to bring out your superpower and when to keep your cape tucked in. And then you ask kids to explain to you what their diagnosis is again. And then they say, I have a protector's brain. And I'm telling you, they cry. And then I give them one more label. And I say, may I give you one more? And they're like, okay. And these are foster care kids. They're used to labels so that they know what to put in their file next. And then I go, say their name is Lisa. Lisa. And then they're waiting. And I'm like, no. That was it. Lisa. Nothing more, nothing less. It is transformative in people's lives. Our job is to offer radical calmness amidst a chaotic reality, right? We are the adults who co-regulate. What is co-regulation? Think of it if you're on a plane with turbulence, right? How do you decide whether or not you're safe? The plane gets all bumpy. You look at the flight attendants. If they're still serving the peanuts, you're chill, right? We are the adults who are the flight attendants. We are the ones who are going to co-regulate for them. And that is what amygdala to amygdala communication is. The world might feel explosive to you. I got you. I'm here. Why don't you let my amygdala comfort yours? That's the key to de-escalation, critical to anticipating a problem. Oh, this last one, this was an 18-year-old boy who I asked him to describe himself. And he said, I like to think of myself as Mother Teresa, but with an anger problem, right? That's who my kids are. The best and most compassionate kids in the world when they are made to feel safe. Self-regulation is a skill to be developed. I am sick and tired of people judging people's character by the fact that they cannot yet control themselves. If they have not yet had the opportunity to practice self-regulation skills in a nurturing and protective environment, then that's on the adults, not on the kids. We have the ability to help them with their skills. Next, know this. If, Rachel, you asked me to come and speak to your business community, right, this would be the biggest and most important slide of the day, right? Here's the thing. These people who have endured hardships bring the most to our world in terms of compassion, commitment, and indeed loyalty. But transitions aren't easy, right? So you got to work through the transitions. Because for young people from foster care, for those of you who haven't guessed, I'm really into foster care nationally and supporting foster care families. Every new opportunity is a chance to be rejected entirely. They're always thinking, where's the tiger? Am I safe? What if I'm judged? Will I be rejected? And if you think that, then one of the things you're going to do is to pretend you don't care. You might choose in order to maintain control, you might fail fast. Because when you do, at least it gives you control. We got to know who these kids are and give them the real investment. These 4 principles are the key to trauma-sensitive practices. This is the Reaching Teens model. Number 1, knowing what's about you and what's not about you, right? Again, so that I can hold your pain. This isn't about building a wall. It's the opposite. It allows me to get closer to you because when you're throwing daggers at me, I can know that they were never intended for me. And therefore, I don't have to personalize it. Because if I personalize it, then I get all defensive, right? And defensiveness never works. So like my entire reputation, if you come to the hospital, I'm known as like the very chill attending, right? The guy who can walk through the hallways and calm everything down. And my secret, really, is that I'm faking it, right? I am not biologically calm at all, right? At all. But I am always in my head explaining how I need to behave. Sandy Bloom, who's, by the way, a neighbor of mine, she's probably like 500 yards away from me now. Her thing from the sanctuary movement is changing your lens from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Next, and we're going to really begin pivoting into this in a minute, seeing people as they deserve to be seen, not based on labels they've received or behaviors they've displayed. And the last one we've already talked, giving control back to people from whom control has been taken away. Boys and Girls Club motto of America is to enable all young people, especially those who need us the most, to reach their full potential as productive, caring, responsible citizens. Well, you know what, guys? The kids who need you the most, they're not the cutest kids. right? They're not the kids who are going to go, oh, Dr. Ken, I love you. The kids who need you the most are the ones who are sitting in the back of the classroom with their nose dripping down their shirts and who have no idea that an adult is capable of helping them wipe their nose. That's the kid who needs you the most. They're the ones who push you away. They're the ones who make you uncomfortable. And we got to know that. You got to know that, because we who care about kids, we also desire affirmation. And the kids who need us the most are not the ones giving us the most and the most immediate affirmation, which means we have to receive affirmation from each other, right? From each other. In one ditty, nobody dared go near the tower. A fearsome dragon sat on its top until one day a knight rode up. Do you need help to get down? Please. That's what trauma-sensitive practices is. At this point, we were gonna break into small groups, but to your credit, there's too many of you. So you are above Zoom's threshold for small groups. So what for you to reflect on as when you speak to your neighbors and your organizations is, what concrete steps can we take during this epidemic to make this an opportunity for healing for those youth deserving of our most focused attention? Emphasis on the word concrete. Just to show you what a baby I am, like I am really proud that I put the word concrete in gray there to match concrete, right? But I really want it to be concrete. I don't want any philosophical commitment. Don't keep it poetic. Make it real. What can you do? What are the policies that can be put in place? What are the scripts that can be said? And I have these scripts written. Happy to send them to you. All right. Now, let's begin getting into application, right? Developing strengths, acknowledging risk while acknowledging trauma. All right. Remember this. Behavioral change is forward and backward movement. It's a few steps forward, few steps back, few steps forward, a few steps back, a few steps forward. But where am I now? Still forward. If you ask kids what they want from adults more than anything else, what they want is someone to have their back. What does that mean? This is another skill for you to walk away with. You can change today. Today you can change this, and you will find yourself in people's lives during times of crisis much more efficiently. What we tend to be is we tend to be cheerleaders. So a kid comes to me and they're like, hey, Dr. Ken, I got straight A's in school. My natural predilection is to go, look at you, so proud of you. You're going to be a nurse practitioner one day. You can do it, man. I'm so proud of you. And the next time that kid's grades go good, first guy he's calling is me. He's going to be all over wanting to talk to me, right? And the next quarter, I'm finding out right after he calls his mom because he wants to please me so badly. But what happens when his dad dies and his mom gets depressed and he's now taking care of 3 kids? He's waking up at 4:30 in the morning to make sure they're fed. He's not beginning his homework till 10 because he's finishing all of their homework and he's doing their prayers and putting them to bed. And now he's getting C's and D's and he falls asleep in the classroom and the teacher looks at him and says, why are you even here if you fall asleep in the classroom? And now he's getting D's. Will I know? No, I will not know. Because this kid believes my relationship is a cheerleading relationship and he will not want to disappoint me. So how do we have a kid back? We don't just cheer when they're moving forward, but when we cheer, we honor the relationship, not what the kids told me. So something as simple as, hey, Dr. Ken, I got straight A's in school. Something as simple as me going, man, I love the fact that you tell me what's going on in your life. Thank you. That's it. He still gets the affirmation. But now when he's getting the D's, he's going to go, Dr. Ken always wants to know what's going on in my life. And I am positioned to be a healer rather than a cheerleader. Next, behavioral change is a process, not an event. People have to become aware of a problem. Then they have to have the motivation to do something about the problem. Then they have to have the skills to put into action. Then they have to go through a process of trial and error to figure out whether they're going to keep their new behavior or not. And then they're going to either maintain their new behavior or their behavior is going to be undermined because they're going to relapse into it because society says people like you shouldn't be doing this. I want to be a virgin until I'm married. What's going to happen when I turn on the TV, right? Am I going to feel during identity development like there's something wrong? Then I'm going to relapse. So this is the behavioral change process. If this was an all-day thing, I'd spend 20 minutes on this side. But I want to focus on this. There's this other concept in behavioral change called pre-contemplation. which in English means you haven't thought about it yet. And then people look back at this and go, golly, if they haven't thought about it yet, then the problem is they must lack awareness. Let me teach them more some facts. That's missing the point. Pre-contemplation is something different. It is about shame and demoralization and lack of confidence. So we're going to do things differently. We're going to build confidence in kids' lives by finding their competencies. So this kid's smoking weed, bad for his brain development. This kid's dealing drugs, bad for the community. This kid wants to become pregnant and she's only 15 years old. Does she not understand the scourge of intergenerational poverty? We got only a few minutes, so let's focus on everything the kid needs to know. So we look at that 16-year-old boy or that 15-year-old boy who's smoking weed and we say, man, do you not understand that marijuana will fry your brain, make you grow breasts, and shrink your balls? All of which is incidentally true-ish. But how does he react? He goes, thanks, doc, and he smokes more. Why was he smoking in the first place? Because he was sensitive. Because he was a big feeler and he wanted to turn it down, because he was a worrier. So my telling him his balls are going to shrink, do you understand on some level how that does not help with his worry, right? It's going to teach him, make him go directly into his drug pattern. What are we going to do instead? We are going to find everything that is good and right in these kids. We are going to listen for behaviorally operational strengths, meaning things about them that show that they already possess the things that are going to make them be able to get past their problem. In this kid's case, it is celebrating his sensitivity, acknowledging that he is a deep thinker. And then we build from there, right? But we're listening for behaviorally operational strengths. In other words, don't be starting talking to kids and talking about their hair and talking about their nails and talking about their sports teams. That's just a load of crap and kids know it. Instead, you listen intensely to kids for what is good and right. Resilience in the context of a life that would have destroyed you. Compassion beyond measure, right? You're listening for insight, for these things that it's amazing about these kids. Because that's what love is. Love is seeing someone as they deserve to be seen, as they really are, not through the lens of the behaviors they've sometimes needed to display. And then what do? Then we tell the kid, in the context of all that is good and right, why they should change. So we speak in the following way. We say heart, and you don't say heart, stomach, but in your head, this is the choreograph. Heart, I'm going to tell you why I love you, without using the word love, because that can be creepy because it's been misused by some people, but you express love using this definition. Heart, I see you. Stomach, I am worried about you. Head, I want to plan with you. Hands, how can I support you in your journey? That's love-based counseling. I feel I care. Because of that, I worry. I plan with you knowing you are the expert in your own life. I support you in your journey. Next, in order to have a sustained relationship with a kid, you got to know that you've got to plant the seeds for way after you're gone. The biggest mistake you can make is to think that is to get into a rescue fantasy with a kid. If a kid walks away going, wow, Dr. Ken was the best doctor I ever met, and then they don't think they can do it on their own, then I've hurt that kid. So as much as it feels good to have a kid go like, Dr. Ken, you were amazing, I know that something's wrong if I'm getting that. I need to have the kid have the experience where they understand they have their ruby slippers. I need to really focus on their strengths and know that the healing lies within them. And if they do look at you, and that's the way to have a sustained impact. If they do look at you and say, Miss Kelsey, you're amazing. Thank you so much. You want to take it in and you want to congratulate yourself because it feels good. Instead, hold up the mirror and go, man, the only reason that I was able to get anywhere is because you chose to share myself with you, yourself with me. Look at yourself. You've got the healing within you. When you do that, things change for kids. Now, let's keep going deeper. So we're already talking about giving kids control. The first step of giving kids control was seeing them the way they deserve to be seen, knowing that they've got their ruby slippers, they are looking in the mirror, you are a facilitator in their journey to elevate their strengths and to help guide them. But now let's help them come up with ideas. We've got to first learn to talk to kids in a way that we do not undermine the way that they are thinking, right? Which means we have to understand how kids think, including how they think when they're stressed or feel stupid. Kids are concrete thinkers. They see things exactly as they are. Adults are abstract thinkers. They can think about the future, they can plan, they can think about complexity. Adolescence is somewhere in the middle. So how is it that I, as an adult, understand that when someone takes me out to dinner, is incredibly flattering to me, says the nicest things to me, and then asks to touch me, that they were being manipulative? How did I get here? So think about the 14-year-old girl. The guy comes up to her and says, I love you. Does she say, I question the veracity of that statement indeed? No. She says, I love you too. And then he says, words aren't good enough between us. I want to show you how much I love you. And where is he the next day? Gone. And she has learned to go from one place to another in the step of behavioral change, right? So it's the best way to learn, by the way. Trial and error, mistake, recovery, best way to learn. But these are our daughters, these are our kids we care about. We don't want them to suffer. So what do? We tell them, right? And how do we deliver the information? In a abstract lecture format. Don't you know that what you're doing right now, which I'm going to call behavior A, could easily lead to consequence B, which is more than likely to go to consequence C? I never imagined you do consequence C. Now I look at you and I wonder what's between your ears except for cobwebs. If consequence C happens, you're more than likely to go into consequence D, which you never would have done if you didn't begin hanging out with Marcus, whose own mother doesn't respect him. If consequence D happens, you're likely to go into consequence E, which is a slippery slope down to consequence F. Look at me, young man, when I'm talking to you. This is not for my own good. More than likely to go into consequence H, which could lead to consequence I. And do you know what happens if consequence I happens? You die is what happens. And what does the kid hear? Womp, 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 womp. Die. You've done hot communication, so you're speaking to their amygdala, meaning you cannot get rational thought. And the mathematical structure of the lecture is right in front of you. It's algebra. When you're running from a tiger, you can't be getting that. So what do? We are incredibly calm. We honor the intelligence the kids do have, and we speak in simple math. A plus B equals C. And when they're at C, and only when they're at C, do you take them to D. That might be the same day, it might be a month from now. But you let them be in charge, you let them figure it out with your adult guidance. Because you're running from a tiger, you can't be doing the Pythagorean theorem, but you're running from a tiger, then you can pretty easily say, what's 1 plus 2? And you're going to be able to know 3. It's a different part of your brain. Example, 14-year-old girl. She is in a school-based clinic. She has a scleral hemorrhage. So for those of you who are not doctors, I saw there's at least one pediatrician on the call. Hey, all right. But for those of you who are not, a scleral hemorrhage is blood on the eye, and you just go like, hey, darling, you're going to be okay. But this 14-year-old girl, I said, hey, what happened? And she said, I got in a fight yesterday. I said, what made you mad enough to fight? She said, well, I took this trip to New York and I bought this t-shirt for $12.50 and I thought I looked good, but this girl called me fat, but that didn't make me mad enough to fight. But then she called my mother a garden tool and I was not going to take that. And then I said to her, well, what's going to happen now? And she said, I'm going to kill her. I'm going to kill her. That's why I brought this knife to school today. And she pats her pocket. Now, does she really want to kill her? What do you think? No, because she didn't expect me to go, is it sharp enough? But if I give her the lecture now, put away the knife, call security, don't you realize you're going to die? You could end up being in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. You could end up dead. And what's your mom thinking? You're going to have kids. And I do that, then I'm speaking to her amygdala. It's not going to work. And what else is going to happen? She's going to escalate. I don't want her to escalate because she's got a knife. So this is self-protection as well. I want her to think. So I begin drawing out a decision tree. This is the real decision tree. The words are going to be a little bit more accurate than the slide because I couldn't fit it all in a slide. But I want you to know how calmly we walked her to thinking this through. So I begin scribbling on the don't make me dirty roll paper in a doctor's office. Here's you. What do you want to have happen? I want her dead. I said, keep your knife in your pocket, but here is a marker. And I'm going to want you to take the marker and to stab me with it slowly so we can think. She stabs me, and I take it out of her hand, and I stab her in the back, all very slowly. You're stabbed in the back and you're left in a wheelchair. Did you think that this could happen? No. But could it? No. Do you know anyone who it's happened to? Well, there's this guy on my block, he's in a chair because he got stabbed. Huh, how did that happen? I don't know. Well, do you think he woke up one morning and said, I'm going to end up being in a wheelchair? Well, that's stupid. Well, then what happened? I don't know, things just got out of hand. Oh, okay. What do you want to have happen? I want her dead. Okay, let's do this again. She goes to stab me, I stab her in the heart. What happens? She's killed. Well, what do you want to have happen? I keep telling you, I want her dead. This is all happening slowly, don't forget. She's doing more talking than I am. So, okay, you killed her. How do you feel? And she said, good. How long do you feel good or happy for? Think for a minute what she said. Pause. The overwhelming majority of you, because I've done this live a lot, the overwhelming majority of you think she said forever. No, that's the way adults think kids think. What she said is all day. So in 2020 Philadelphia talk, that would be, I don't know, a minute, right? But she said all day. And I said, well, what happens the next day? And she said, I get probation. I said, yeah, no. You're going to jail because this was first-degree murder. How's your mom feeling now that you're in jail? And she realized that her mom was ashamed. When you're in jail, are you going to be able to have kids? No. Are you going to finish your education? No. When you get out of jail, are you going to be able to get a good job? No. And she took it all the way out to dying poor with no family, which is realistic if you commit murder when you're 14. I said, well, what if you don't kill her? What if you both live? How do you feel? And she said, angry. How long do you feel angry for? And she said, all day. We let her finish school. We let her have kids. And we let her make her mom proud. That's 2 lives saved. Brilliant, huh? Right? What do you think? Thank you. Rachel is shaking her head because she's my audience, and William. So my whole point, though, this isn't brilliant at all. If you think this is brilliant, then you don't get me and you don't get the possibility of the power of what we're doing here right now. This is a skill set. You don't need a doctorate. This is common sense. That's a lecture. That is a lecture. There isn't a person in the world, there isn't a grandma in the country who couldn't give this lecture. The skill is to break it down and to give it calmly to meet the cognitive capacity of adolescents so that they own the solutions, because when they own the solutions, they do not rebel, and then you just go like, oh, you got it, oh, and you walk away, right? So nothing brilliant about this at all. Now I'm going to talk about stress, another very major way in which we are going to help kids learn to take control over their lives. See, at its core, resilience is about learning to cope in a positive way with life's inevitable stressors. And we might do our greatest good by equipping youth with a wide range of coping strategies. Because people who choose positive coping strategies, they can gain control, right? Here's the motto. Stress is incredibly uncomfortable. It makes you sweat. It makes you smell. It makes you not be able to think clearly. You got to do something with that discomfort, and that's what coping is. And there are positive ways of coping and negative ways of coping. One of the mistakes that you can make is to believe that a negative way doesn't work. No, the whole problem is that the negative ways work best. These are your quick, easy fixes. This is drugs, this is sex, this is punching someone in the face, this is cutting, right? They work great. The problem is that they destroy you because they lead to more stress. So our challenge is not to condemn kids who are doing the negative coping strategies, but actually to congratulate them for coming up with something to make themselves feel better, and then invite them in a healing and loving process to create a path of least resistance towards positive coping strategies. The most important coping strategy undoubtedly is human connection. It's the way we began the talk, right? But we also can do the cognitive work, defining the stressor. This right here, this is cognitive behavioral therapy on one slide. Being able to tell the difference between a real tiger and a paper tiger, right? And bottom line is, can this kill me? Second thing is, knowing when bad things are temporary. This is one of those things we got to be pulling out right now. We got to be pulling out the grandma's wisdom. We're going to get through this together. This too shall pass. Remember, adolescents don't have that experience yet. So they think that, some think this is the end of the world. They don't have the experience of having known that humanity has lived through things like this before. Never with the 24/7 news cycle, but we've lived through it, right? And then the last thing is knowing when good things are permanent. This is really important for the kids who are deserving of our most focused attention. Because let me tell you something. If you do not have experience that life is good and that good things are going to happen to you, when good things do begin happening to you, and it's in, say, one of our programs, then what's going to happen is when you begin transitioning away from the program, you think that you don't have your ruby slippers on, you think that you're going to fail out in the world, you don't understand that good things can be permanent because you own them, then what's going to happen is you shoot yourself in the foot. I know you're out there shaking your heads, those of us in intervention programs, with how many kids, just as they're about to graduate, screw up. This is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence at all. This is about kids feeling like they're going to lose control and gaining control in the way that they can. And what this is an indication for our programs that our boundaries are off and we're not doing an adequate job of helping them to wear their ruby slippers. I have a comprehensive stress reduction site. I'm going to show you in a minute, but I just want to say this here. The worst thing is not to be stressed, it's to be known. So let's talk about what happens. People go through a lot of things, right? And you wish you could process them. And here I speak to our kids and I speak to you as a healer and as a provider and as a server and as the grandma and grandpas in the community, right? You go through a lot and you want to process this, but you can't because things just keep coming. So they keep coming. And sanity is defined by creating a container of your emotions. And you put things in the container, you say, I'll deal with it later. Really, I will. I'll deal with it later. But you don't. And you can't because things keep coming. And they keep coming. And you say, I'm going to process it. But then you get home and you got to do other things instead, right? You got to make love. You got to talk to your family. You got to pay the bills. You got to do the laundry. They keep coming. So the only thing you can do is to build thicker walls. Thicker and thicker walls until this becomes what I call a leaden box. Why lead? Because even a little bit of lead in your system is toxic to your development. Even a little bit of lead in your system makes you not be able to think. It is a poisonous substance. You can't see through it. And when the most passionate themes of human existence are trapped inside of a leaden box, you stop feeling. And that's what professional burnout is. And then what happens? Someone opens up your lid, and what pours out is rage. So my pain is that I bear witness to pain. I've actually had a really good life, right? For the kids who I take care of, what happens is they're living inside this leaden box. And if they want their heads to stop spinning, marijuana works, right? Marijuana stops your head from spinning. If you want some control over when your rage comes out, get drunk. So this actually explains some of the things that drive substance use as well. And from a trauma-informed model, what we see in kids, trauma-sensitive, we see the rage and then we label the rage. When what's really going on is what happened to them. This is a picture of what happened to them. So what do we want to do, both for our kids and for ourselves? Is we want to build a different kind of container, a container that I call a Tupperware box. It's still a container, but the stuff inside it don't stink. Right? And you go through the process of emotional intelligence. You know what's inside. Each one of those things represent a story. Rather than random facts, these are things that happened to me. These are things that I witnessed. And because these are things that I witnessed, I control them because I know what's inside rather than them controlling me. At a time of my choosing, I open the lid and I choose one thing, and I let it out in some way that says I blanked it out. I cried it out, I laughed it out, I prayed it out, I talked it out, I danced it out, I slammed it out. Whatever it is, you let it out. Then you close the lid and there's just a little bit less inside, right? That is the secret of professional survival. And if this was the longer talk or if I ever come back to you, I'll show you real examples of kids' Tupperware boxes. All right? This is where I might screw up technologically. Everything I'm about to show you is completely free. This is the Center for Parent and Teen Communication. This is my center. It is a multi-million-dollar center designed, that doesn't mean money goes in my pocket, right? But it's a center designed to reshape the narrative about adolescence. And the narrative about adolescence is basically survival guide. So there's a few things wrong with the general narrative. Most books about adolescence have a subtitle using the word survival. That's poisonous to parents because it makes parents think that they don't really matter, because it's just a time to be survived. This is a strength-based approach that also is very reality-based. The other thing is the most materials out there are race and class biased, which end up perpetuating structural inequities. In other words, if you give parenting ideas that are not culturally aligned to people, you're actually sending the message that you're not a good parent and you harm people. So my partner in this is Joanna Lee Williams of UVA. She is one of the most amazing people on earth. And she is, she's an African-American woman who looks at identity development in the context of positive racial identity in the context of marginalization and oppression. So we hope that we have struck the right balance, but we, of course, still have a lot to learn. Within this webpage, there are a lot of different stories, 100-word pieces within each one of these categories. There are 100-word pieces, 2,000-word pieces, 30-second videos, 10-minute videos, a whole bunch of things. Changing How We See Teens is a lot of material that, can you see my little cursor on the screen? Can you see me doing it? Yes. Okay. So this would open up to a lot of different ways of reframing adolescence. I'd like to draw your attention to two things that you can begin using today. Again, totally free, link down now, use it. Supporting emotional health. I believe that an incredibly important thing here is to teach families how to use strength-based language to seek help. It's really easy to teach people. Teach them that that treatment can work, time invested will pay off, seeking treatment is an act of strength, you're not alone, strong feelings now tell me that you're going to be a wonderful person later. It goes through all the words the young people need to hear in order to make the transition. So this is a great strength-based referral thing, and there are lots of other things as well there. I want to call your attention to the section for teens. I'd like as many of you want to link to this as possible. Under 14s, managing stress. These materials are written by kids, for kids, but it's all rooted in the evidence. It's all rooted in my consolidation of research, meaning not my research, meaning the research of others that I put together. So the first piece, build a stress management plan. It explains stress. It has films by kids. And each one of these links can take you to another film or another piece. You could spend hours on this site if you wanted to, or you can start your plan by linking on that click. And then we walk you through, you put in your name. This is not research. We are not collecting data. We are just collecting your email so you can design your own plan. You get back your own PDF. We are not saving it. All right. And we tell the kids that. All right. And then we walk them through a stress reduction plan. Like it begins with, what do I treat like a real tiger? And then they begin writing it in. We give them some choice points and we just work them through some basic cognitive work. Here's, the most important word in cognitive behavioral therapy is the word yet. I can't do math because I can't do math yet. We teach these kids how to do their next plan. From there, we talk about breaking mountains into hills. From there, avoiding problems. From there, shifting on to things you can change for personal empowerment. The importance of exercise, of relaxation, of sleep, of nutrition. From there, we go to emotional work. Like if you want to do drug prevention, you don't tell kids not to do drugs. You tell them ways to escape that work so you don't need drugs, right? Enjoying nature, listening to common music. From there, we talk about releasing emotions. From there, we talk about contributing to community to give yourself a sense of meaning and purpose. They choose my choices or they fill in anything they want. Now they have a comprehensive rooted in the evidence, stress management plan that they've designed themselves. So let me see if this still works. Please be, yes, it worked. I didn't screw up. Please use that. You could use it today. Kids need them now more than ever. I want to spend we got about 13 minutes left, and I want to just make a little shift. I really want to talk about us, because I meant what I said about protecting the grandmas and the grandpas. So if I was there for a day or several days, this would be entire forums in themselves. How to protect staff, how to protect us, the healers, the people who are demonstrating loving kindness. All I want to do for now, in just this very few minutes, is to talk about boundaries. And to remember that the word boundaries right now has a political meaning. I'm not going to go there, all right? But it has a political meaning. So boundaries you think of as a wall between us. Boundaries you think of as a way as defining a them, which somehow is supposed to make us feel better. In this context, it's totally different. Boundaries are the opportunity that allow you to draw nearer to someone safely, right? It's actually about drawing closer without hurting people. And I want to tell you that I'm not down with the easy stuff. The easy stuff, if you go to the American Academy of Pediatrics website, here's what I learned. I learned that I shouldn't touch the kids inappropriately. I shouldn't date their mothers or fathers. I shouldn't take expensive presents, but if it's a baked good or a craft good, it's in my discretion. I need you to know how much that information does not help me, right? What I want to know is, how do you love and still remain whole yourself? That's what I want to know. And I want you to know that we've actually been talking about it for nearly 2 hours. And if I had been there and you had a half day of me, or I do up to 3-day talks, it's like all I talk about. It's all interwoven. Knowing where your buttons are. If you don't know yourself, and listen, who am I? Was the question of your adolescence too. And if you didn't get a little stuck and a little bit confused, you weren't breathing. Your eyes were closed. And those are buttons that are installed within you. And when a kid in front of you has a button or reminds you, maybe it's someone you would have been attracted to who never would have been attracted to you. Maybe their mother reminds you of your aunt you can't stand, right? But you just got buttons. And if you don't know where your buttons are, this stuff is emotionally laborious, right? And once you know who you are and who you were as an adolescent, then you can begin going, not about me, this is about the kid. Being trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive, the first piece is knowing what's about you and what's not about you. Knowing who's the expert, like this fundamental youth development principle of knowing the kids are the experts in their own lives, makes you really, really authentically protected, right? Because it means you're not responsible for fixing lives. In fact, you hurt people when you get into a rescue fantasy. So my academic story is I was hired to become the medical director in New York at Covenant House right out of residency. I was 27 years old, and I was going to have the top job in homeless America for youth. Don't be super impressed because no one else was applying, right? But it was really like I was ready. When I was 27, I looked like I was about 17 or 18 still because I reached puberty really, really late, and I'm really little and stuff. And I dressed like the kids, and I had food insecurity during medical school, like very real food insecurity. And so I was out there on the streets. I related to the kids. They knew how deeply I cared about them. I would tap a vein for them. When they weren't ready to change, I was like, I'm going to stick you with you, man, until you're ready. So as it turns out, there was a big problem in 1990 with Covenant House internationally. Many of us lost our jobs because we're now the best organization again. But I never got to do that job because they ran out of funding. So I went into academic medicine instead, which was the best thing that ever happened to me because I'm going to be able to do this work till I retire. And if I had gone to Covenant House at 27, I would have only done this work for 6 months. You know why? Did you hear the word me too much when I just described how cool I was as a 27-year-old? All about me. I wasn't a phony. I was the most sincere guy you're going to meet, but I didn't yet understand boundaries. And I can't care about a kid getting better before they're ready to get better. I can't tap a vein for a kid because I'm going to lose blood. So the rescue fantasy is inherently classist and all the other isms that come with it. And I was living in a rescue fantasy. I wasn't ready for this work. And so the best thing that ever happened to me was losing that job, right? Because now I really get who the expert is. I'm just the facilitator. My job is to give control back to people. That's my job. I'm going to skip these two concepts for right now. And the I or the we is the really important thing that I want to mention. When someone tells you that you're the best doctor or the best nurse or the best counselor they ever had, you gotta like inside go yippee. But the words that come out of your mouth have to be, yeah, we all care about young people. I'm lucky to work with an amazing group of people, because you can't be on 24/7, right? You can't. And the most important boundary, perhaps, is to remember that just as we love at work, we have to be able to love differently in our homes. You want to know what really creates burnout? What really creates burnout is when you hold your family to the same standard that you hold the people that you work with, right? If you end up saying, like, to your kids, who God willing have some privileges, and if you end up saying to them, do you have any idea what real problems are? You have no right to feel. You will lose your family in a heartbeat. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to try to say, no, this is being recorded. I'm not going to tell you that real story. Sorry. But like, I've learned this lesson with my family by not making mistakes. You know what? I am going to tell you this story. It was my girl's senior prom. And I came home after one of the worst days of Covenant House I've ever had. I don't remember what happened, but I knew I was in my rope's end. My girls were ready to go to senior prom, and they were really in a terrible mood. Because if you don't realize that senior prom is all about taking pictures, and they had gotten their hair done, and they got smoky eyes, which is like black makeup on your eyes, and they thought that it was going to look terrible. And they were like really upset. And every corpuscle in my being wanted to go, WTF, do you know what a problem is? Do you know how lucky you are to be able to pay for your hair to get done? But I didn't. Because it's not about them. They shouldn't be suffering or not be allowed to have their emotions because other kids have it worse. So I was like, oh, this is a terrible thing. And I took pictures of them and told them they looked beautiful anyway. Anyways, so everybody goes out to prom, and then in Philadelphia, after prom, everyone in their school goes to one of the shore towns. And my kids didn't, because we had to go down to Washington the next day. So my kids had to come home at 2 a.m. And the reason it was the 25th anniversary of the Holocaust Museum. And my mother-in-law is now the last survivor of the first transport in Auschwitz. She's number 1064. And she's now 95, or she'll be 95 in a month. And so what happened is the next day, the high school kids all had their pictures of them down at the shore town, the high school picture, like, this is how cool I look in my dress and whatever. And they were drunk. And my girls' Facebook pages had a picture of my mother-in-law's arm, number 1064, with this other woman's arm. And the caption was, the bravest people we know. My point being, trust the universe. Do not bring home the suffering to your home. Your family, we are fighting for a world in which every kid has enough, not a world in which your kids suffer, right? So don't bring it home. Let them know what you do. That's going to give them the lesson, and wear that with pride. But otherwise, you will lose your family. And the day you lose your family is the day you will hate your work. And the day you hate your work is the day you will burn out, and many kids will suffer. And that might be the most important boundary. Trust the universe. One of my daughters now, I told you what she's doing. She's working on mass incarceration. The other's about to join a master's and probably a doctoral program in intercultural communication to talk about hard things. It works. Trust the universe. Do what you're doing. The kids are watching you. Almost done. How are we going to judge our success, guys? Team, Peace and Justice Institute, Orlando. You're going to put this into initiative. God willing, I'll be there alongside you at some level. Okay, as you do this. But let me tell you this. I want you to know, don't think you're going to measure the stuff that counts. Just give up, right? So go ahead, measure grades, jobs, graduations, and suspension rates, but understand how difficult it is to measure the real stuff. What we're really trying to do is prove that adolescents are capable of healing from trauma. And that is going to take decades to prove. And if we change their genes, please God, that's going to take a generation to know. You can't be measuring that, right? What we want to do is help our young people experience that people are worthy of trust. Now's the moment. Now is the moment. I mean, the moment is every day, 24/7, 365, throughout the years. But right now, for the next 6 weeks, let's make these kids feel safe, like they've never felt. You know, why do we love? We love so that kids know that they're worthy of being loved. That's why we love. And thereby, we make it more likely that our youth are going to be able to pass along our love to the children and thereby break the cycle of trauma and intergenerational oppression. We want to make it so our young people can feel again. We want to create the kind of environment where staff never, ever, ever forgets how to feel. We want to create schools and communities that are really safer. Like, seriously, I know I'm speaking to Florida, but trust me, building a prison has never made a community safer. What makes a community safer is really authentically building the kids. By launching all young people in adulthood knowing that they're okay just the way they are. And a shout out to our LGBT brothers and sisters and younger brothers and sisters coming up, right? We just the way they are, all right? And a critical thought I have to say, you know, the danger of listening to a guy like me who's kind of very real, very raw, but very positive, and who talks about how the people who have been through the most bring the most to the world. And I believe that in every corpuscle of my being. But the danger is that you could walk away going, challenges are good for you. And let me tell you something. If I could snap a finger right now and make everybody have privilege, that's exactly what I would do. All right? All right? So even as we celebrate all that is good and right about people who have been through some of the greatest challenges, we must not imply the challenges are good for you. Development occurs best in the context of safe, secure, sustained, and nurturing relationships. Our goal is to have every young person benefit from those protective forces, starting at very young ages and lasting throughout their development. And at the end of this talk, like, I do have a sense of what it's like to listen to me for a long time. I've never had to listen to a computer for 2.5 hours. Like, I would have died if I was you. I hope you guys did jumping jacks while I was doing it. But here's what I know. Listening to me is like drinking from a fire hose, right? And it's kind of like you already got so much on your plate, right? So many things on my plate, so many programs, so many different ways that I'm being evaluated. It's absolutely crazy. I can't have one more thing on my plate. And now this little man from Philadelphia, he's telling me to love the children too. I've got to love the children and add that to my plate. And my answer is, nothing I'm doing is adding a new program, right? I do have a toolkit to have you put this into place, but this is not a new program. This is not a new thing to put into play. We've been talking about the plate. The power of human connection, the power of absolute respect and unconditional love to be the scaffolding upon which young people rise. We've been talking about the plate. You put this in a plate, you protect the grandmas and grandpas so that they are able to be the scaffolding for the children. All of your other programs will take, they'll just work. We've been talking for 2.5 hours about the plate. I want to congratulate your region for this initiative. If you can create this plate, your kids are going to lead us into the future. And I'm just thrilled and honored to have been a part of it. Thank you.
Dr. Ginsburg, well, first of all, I'm crying. And I know I'm not the only one crying, because it's a message of hope that we need. And I'm not afraid to cry in front of everybody, because you said we're like, if we lose our ability to feel, we've lost something. So, and I want the mayor to know, because he's waiting now, that we've just heard a really powerful talk for our community. And I want you to know, people like Jennifer Foster are saying, I hope he can continue to work with us. And Marcia Hope Goodwin from the city of Orlando is saying, my brother who's a doctor's online, and we got to keep working with Dr. Ginsburg. And I want to tell you, here's the good news story. We are going to continue to work with Dr. Ginsburg, and it is in the plans. And when this thing went online, that was what happened. He said, well, I'm willing to do more than just today. That's how we can work this out. We can do today, and then we can keep it going. So that's what's happening. And I know you all are, I just want you to know, Dr. Ginsburg, like you don't usually in a thing like this get to see all the chats and what people are feeling, but people are inspired. They're saying you've renewed my hope. You've given me the energy to keep going. Early on, they said, this is the best conference I've ever been to, you know? So thank you. And I wanted the mayor to know all this has just happened because, you know, this is Mayor Buddy Dyer. And you know, he has had this vision for this community of a world-class city. And my goodness, as the longest serving mayor in Orlando, he has walked us through a lot. And this is a man that is no stranger to crisis and trauma. And the word love and the language of love, like this is a man who was able to walk us through a trauma that we walked out and said, we feel love for one another. And so I am, you know, grateful to introduce him right now, Mayor Buddy Dyer, to address us all as we are having this profound experience together and with Dr. Ginsburg. Welcome, Mayor. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rachel. I caught the end of Dr. Ginsburg's presentation and extremely powerful. I wish I'd been able to catch the whole thing, but I want to thank the Peace and Justice Institute for, well, and the Early Learning Coalition as well for partnering to bring about this conference today. It's trying times, but it's great that we can be innovative and host a conference like this virtually. City of Orlando is proud to join with Orlando Health and West Orange Healthcare District and Central Florida Foundation to sponsor this. And we know the value of collaboration and resilience. We've had so many opportunities to be tested, certainly the hurricanes that have come through our community when we've all pitched in together. Pulse is the greatest example of love in action and what it looks like and what it's like to be a resilient community. And now Orlando together, we're fighting a pandemic. I hope that locusts aren't the next thing after this, but we're going to get through this one together and understand the importance of resilience and what it takes to build personal resilience. So we had the initial ACEs conference last April, and across sector groups been working to raise awareness about adverse childhood experiences, and the group engages in all sectors to transform the region to one of prevention and hope and healing. I know Dr. Ginsburg gave you many strategies designed to move away from self-destructive quick fixes. I understand you'll have an afternoon session that will be equally fantastic with Wendy Ellis, and you'll learn about the concept of a pair of ACEs, which means adverse childhood experiences in the context of adverse community environments. So we've had a history of transforming pain into positive action and change for the good of our community. And once again, we're faced with that challenge. I know we can do it because we've done it before. Marcia and my staff from the Office of Community Affairs is participating today to make sure that we benefit from what everybody else is learning. So thank you for taking your time today to do this.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for being here. I always feel your support, your authenticity, and your willingness to go to any length for this community. So thank you so much.
I will say I'm wearing a hat today because my hair's gotten a little unruly. I haven't had a haircut in about 2 months. So we can all feel that pain, right?
Exactly. And you look great. No worries for the hat. We're all in this together. Thank you so much. So we're going to move into a Q&A session with Dr. Ginsburg now. And Will Jefferson is going to come back and join me. And so everybody, you've got a Q&A at the bottom of your screen where you can submit questions. Now, here's the news I want to tell you. We're going to have until a little bit before noon when we're going to make lunch announcements, but put your questions. We're probably not going to get to all of them right now. And what's going to happen is Dr. Ginsburg is going to be giving presentations, a number of them over the summer months, and you'll know about them and you'll be invited. And then of course we invite you to share, because this work is about impact, collective impact. You know, it's the roots. And so you think, well, that person doesn't have that much influence. Don't be fooled. That's one of the grandmothers. And that's probably one of the more influential people in the community, right? So if you think of somebody that needs to see Dr. Ginsburg in the next session, don't judge who it is, because it's probably one of our grandmothers. Okay, so I'm going to ask the opening question because I have one, and then we're getting them sent in through the team that's following the Q&A. So make sure you're putting in your questions. And here's my first one, Dr. Ginsburg. So I've already lost it with my kids. I mean, I've done the right more than once. I'm on day 38. How do I recover? Like, what do I do? Or do I do anything? Just give me some advice, please.
Well, Rachel, it sounds like you're a bad mother. Let's start there. So seriously, you're a human being. I actually think that this is an amazing opportunity to model how to navigate uncertainty with all of its complexity. So take the COVID away from it. And in general, if you, like, literally, I've never given a parent, that's like half of what I do is parenting talks. And I've never given a parenting talk in my life where someone doesn't raise their hand and go, what do you do if you've already messed up? So if you've already messed up, apologize. Like, literally apologize and say, I messed up, and then say, I want to do better. Can you guide me how I can do better here? That's in general. Like, the kids' mouths will drop, but when you invite them as partners, it's amazing. In this particular time, so this is like what I'm writing today for Center for Parenting Communication. I'm writing an article, get posted tomorrow or the next day, called Navigating Uncertainty. This is a moment where you're navigating uncertainty. If you've messed up, if you've exploded, you talk about it. You talk about the frailty and complexity of being a human being. You talk about what you're going to do to try to get better. You make the point of what you're doing to take breaks, to release your emotions, to stop listening to news 24/7, to begin hearing some, whatever it is for you, model it, model it, model it. But part of modeling is failing and recovering, right? That's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've written 6 or 7 parenting books and blah, blah, blah. Do you think I was a perfect parent? Of course not, right? It's complicated. Families are complicated, right? It's funny. I remember in Reaching Teens, there's this great film from one of the alternative schools in Philadelphia called El Centro de Estudiantes. And I remember one of the people was saying, we like to create family in this school. And one of the other people said, I've always hated that term, right? Because it always feels really trite or unrealistic. He said, but then I came to realize families are the most complicated places on earth. And we're pretty complicated too. Family is about struggling, about acknowledging the struggles, but still knowing that at the end of the day, you're going to stick together. And for that reason, I'm willing to call our school a family. So that's what I would say. I would say, Rachel, life is complicated. You're human. Model it, and model for your kids that you need to be forgiven and to know that they stand by you, because that's what you need now. And that's what you'll always give them.
Thank you.
Awesome. I have the next question for you, Dr. Ginsburg. The question says, does intergenerational trauma tell us anything about the possibility that members of minoritized or racialized communities have a higher sympathetic tone?
So we know that minority communities have higher blood pressure rates. We know that. We know that there's higher rates. I mean, this is the reason why they are suffering more specifically from COVID. It's for 2 reasons. It's about the privilege of social distancing and getting nutrition and not having to go outside. But it is also about underlying health conditions. So when you're talking about sympathetic tone, you're talking about your emergency nervous system being on higher alert. So What I don't know is if that's ever been directly measured in terms of that tone. I do know that cortisol levels manifest in the high blood pressure that we know has been incredibly measured, as well as in diabetes and these other conditions. And absolutely, communities of colors suffer at vastly disproportionate amounts. So I think the general answer is definitely yes. The specific answer about measuring sympathetic tone, I have to extrapolate from that other information. I'm just not aware of that particular measurement.
Okay, here's the next question coming in. So this question says, Doc, I just lost my screen. Did y'all lose me?
We can see you, Rachel.
Okay, you can see me? Okay, this question says, Doc, I have a lot of businessmen, mostly white, in the community who often ask me for advice on how to engage and empower African American youth. My advice varies depending on the person. What's your strategy?
So the first thing is I'm going to make an assumption based on the question that the person asking the question is more likely to be an African American female. I don't know if that's true, but
okay, I'm going to tell you. I guess I can't. No, I can't tell by the name.
Well,
so, yeah,
I don't know.
Assumption.
I just want to make the teaching point. One of the things that can be pretty poisonous is to ask anybody to have to represent their community. That's the point I want to make, right? So when the image that was portrayed of me of a lot of white businessmen asking someone who wasn't a white businessman, tell me what to do, is it in itself makes me nervous, right? So I want to make sure that as we are working with the business community, we do it in groups, right? Rather than individual people consulting, that we do it in groups. Because when we do it in groups, it's safer and it puts less pressure on an individual to represent, which is too much stress, I believe, for any human being, right? And it allows us to continue to be honest. So what would I say to them? So there's two ways of approaching people, and it really depends on who they are in terms of how you frame issues. If you want to learn how to frame issues for social change, I recommend that you look at Frameworks out of Washington. Frameworks has done a ginormous amount of work on how to frame social change in a way that it will be acceptable even to people who don't generally love social change. Short differences in words can make a big difference. So I know I'm going in circles, but I am trying to answer this question. So the first thing I want to do, because I'm driven by empathy, is I want to talk to people and to make them empathetic and to bring out the reason that they should redistribute resources. But here's the truth. That's not going to always work, all right? And that can actually trigger for some people a reaction that backfires because it can trigger the pull themselves up by their own bootstraps reaction. So what I would suggest is that if nothing else, you talk about self-interest. The business community will thrive when the community thrives, right? The business community will thrive when it is represented through diversity, because more diverse populations will trust that business. And in order to bring in diversity, people with different life experiences, I'm not just talking about race now, I'm talking about class and economics, I'm talking every level of diversity. In order to bring people in, you have to understand that with diversity accompanies histories of marginalization and oppression. And therefore, there may be a transitional period that you need to learn about to bring out the strengths and celebrate the strengths of the people you're going to hire. When you get through that transitional period, your workplace will be more functional, filled with people with the highest levels of commitment, loyalty, and compassion, and be, is access the right word? Utilized by more diverse communities. So if nothing else, self-interest as part of it, along with just Like, I want to just go, it's the right thing to do. But that doesn't always work, right? That was a lot of answers to that question. I hope I did it adequately.
Thank you.
You did phenomenal.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Another question. COVID-19 has placed many of us in situations where now we are confined to a limited space. Many times we are now in relationship with mothers and fathers that over time we might have grown a little distant to. So this question says, what recommendations would you suggest in assisting your client who feels they are not deserving of forgiveness?
Wow. You know, it's funny, like, Rachel, you know how when I was done, you said you wanted to cry? This question makes me want to cry, right? Because I so emphatically and deeply believe that there isn't a person on earth who isn't worthy of self-compassion and forgiveness. And I just have to, like, spiritually, that just hits me. I'm going to tell you a story that's going to be non-identifying, but an example of raw emotions. I was at one of the places I work, and I came into a kid who I had no real major relationship with. I'd seen him for half an hour once. He came up to me and he asked me if I knew when the medicines were going to be coming in for him. And he said he was really having a lot of anxiety. I said, let's talk. And I took him into a place that has like a religious overtone. And his opening line was, I spent the last couple of nights up all night because I was remembering my childhood. I was a demon child. And what happened is that I knew it was one of two things. Either he was told he was oppositional or he was abused. And what happened is that in the last couple of days, he was recalling the depth, intensity, and details of his abuse. And I had what might have been one of the best sessions of my 35-year career, literally down on my knees with him because he wanted to be prayed with, helping him understand that there's no such thing as a demon child and that he is a sacred being. He is and always was a sacred being, and that I'm sorry that he was made to feel like that. It was profound, maybe the most profound encounter I've had in years. I left out a lot of details for obvious reasons, but there literally isn't a person on earth who isn't capable of forgiveness, and now is the time to find that. I need you to draw from Sandy Bloom's major thing. Sandy Bloom is a psychiatrist. She's Philadelphia-based. She's the founder of Sanctuary. She has a different movement now. This whole concept of changing your lens from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. And someone who's struggling with their own self-hatred, lack of self-compassion, I can tell you that those are messages that were put into you through abusive relationships in your life. And that there was never anything wrong with you, but that things happened to you, and that you probably did whatever you've done that you're not proud of as a mechanism to try to survive a life that, you know, frankly, I probably wouldn't have survived without even knowing you. But I know that I'm not as strong as I appear on a video screen. If you can get there through whatever means you can, meditation, prayer, or your family, if you're stuck with your family now and you can figure out a safe way to have them point out what is good and right about you, you might just begin seeing it yourself. But it begins with unlearning the lessons that we learned when we were children who were being abused. You know, when the people who hurt us, for the record, my parents were wonderful and never hurt me. I'm using the term us, and I don't want to imply anything. But when the people who hurt us were the people who were supposed to love us, and we were concrete thinkers, and we only understood that things were good or bad, and we didn't understand nuance, and we didn't understand complexity, and we didn't understand that they too were suffering, we interpreted it in the only ways we could as human beings, which are these people who, according to TV, are supposed to be good, are treating me like this. I must be bad. And those lessons go very, very deep and create very, very deep scars. And I don't know. I do a lot of Native American work. And am I babbling too much? Can I keep going? So I do a lot of Native American work. And I was doing a talk once with the Choctaw Nation. And I remember I was giving like a talk not so dissimilar to what you just heard. And this woman raised her hand or stood up and said, Dr. Ginsburg, you're not telling us anything we didn't already know. And that was meant as the deepest compliment, not a criticism. And she said, all that you're saying is children are sacred beings. And I literally wept. I literally just openly wept and needed to leave the stage because of that profound truth. So whoever wrote that question, you are a sacred being. You were as a child. When you own that, everyone begins healing.
Thank you, Dr. Ginsburg. What I love is that your level of professionalism and accomplishment and your deep access to your emotional life. And I hope that's a tool for all of us educators that are on here, or a flag, is that look what happens to a human being with such deep access to their emotional life. And so this was the question, and this is to honor all the teachers and educators out there, myself included. I'm in the education world. How do we get this information to the teachers who are with the students, often more than their families?
Yeah. Teachers are the most important people in the world. I have a degree in education, which you might have noticed. I used to teach nursery school. Teachers are the most important people in the world, right? Because when kids are going to make it, they're going to make it because they have an adult who believes in them without condition and holds them to high expectations. And if you go back to that original thing, let me just read this. That original opening paragraph that defines reaching teens. Where are we? Here we go. We know that young people need safe, secure, sustained relationships to thrive. We even know that such relationships can allow them to heal from hard past. We have to guide them so that they're accountable to being their best selves. When we do so, they must know that our high expectations are rooted in our caring. Ideally, our efforts at accountability must enhance rather than disrupt our protected relationships. So I'm a doctor. If I hold someone accountable, it's unethical. I can't say, no, I won't treat you, or I'm going to create a consequence based on you're not. It's against our ethics. This is an educator's ethics, to hold kids accountable to being their best selves, to give them consequences, to give them feedback. Teachers are undoubtedly the most important people in this whole thing, right? Now, I would have said that, Rachel, if you and Kelsey said this was a teacher's audience, right? But this is an interdisciplinary audience. So here's the good news. Reaching Teens 2, which is coming out at the end of June, it has all these portals of entry. One of them is for educational settings. Reaching Teens 2 gives up to 94 continuing education credits for every social worker, every counselor, every healthcare provider, nurse, doctors, PAs, health educators in the country. That's 6 years of continuing education credit. We have two of our assistant editors, Mary Jo Pearson and Amy Shield Jones, one in Wisconsin, one in New York, have used Reaching Teens 1 in school districts. And what they've done, they now edited this version and have created a version for educational settings, which means that every objective is now laid onto a social and emotional learning objective, meaning that I can't give you CEUs nationally because nationally they don't exist. They all come locally, but you now have all of the objectives set for every single chapter and idea in social and emotional learning. So the answer is we've created it. It's out in June. This is designed for educators. Please use it. We've spent 7 years making it. Yeah?
All right. Well, I know this is bad news for all of us, I think. And here it is. We have come to the end of our time. Dr. Ginsburg, when you told us, well, I could talk for 2 hours, and you know, all the studies say you can't lecture at people for 2 hours. to keep their attention, and you have been successful.
Well, you knew I was looking at you. Other people might be taking a nap at home right now, you know?
Yeah, well, for me, this has been phenomenal, and I'm sure I speak for Will as well.
Yes.
We want to thank you. You will be back, and it's just hard to say goodbye. Thank you so much. I look forward to the next time we get to engage and plan. Now, I know some of you all out there, Mary Bridges, Jennifer Foster, all of you all from the foster care group, all the teachers, let's talk, right? Kelsey, of the whole education committee, in the ACES training, in the network, let's talk, because as we work together, we believe in collective impact. And I think it's just more than educators that need this, right? It's all of us. So I want to say thank you, Dr. Ginsburg, and I'm going to ping it over to Will, who I'm sure has some words for you, and then he's going to give us announcements about lunch. Thanks.
Thank you.
Dr. Ginsburg, the time that you've shared with us and some of the theory that you've shared has not only been inspirational, but I feel like it has really sent a very clear message to nonprofits, to the faith community, to business sectors, the importance of this work and the importance of being reflective in our approaches. I truly thank you for everything that you've shared with us here, and I look forward to hearing more from you.